Hi, I'm Whitney Espich, the CEO of the MIT Alumni Association, and I hope you enjoy this digital production created for alumni and friends like you.
I'm Kara Miller. I write the Big Idea column for the Boston Globe. I'm thrilled to be here to ask some questions of these amazing scholars and your questions too. And I want to start off with a question that's kind of for both of you, which is about incentive systems. And Emery, I'll start with you because you just spoke. You know, there's been some really good research done, people like Eric Potashnik at Brown, looking at medicine that's done that's sometimes unneeded, or that's proven like, you know, sometimes there'll be a surgical intervention that maybe isn't particularly effective, but people keep doing it anyway. I wonder, I mean, you're talking about fundamentally changing an area of medicine, which might have real upsides for patients, but could be a big lift. I wonder, how hard is it to fundamentally change how all anesthesiologists do things?
Oh, it's extremely hard. I'll just be frank with you. I mean, the ideas that I showed you there about the oscillations in the EEG, we figured those out probably 10 years ago. And then I thought, well, anesthesiologists love physiology. We'll just explain this physiology to them. They'll just adopt our practices, and we'll be on our way. It's not the case, because people have their practice habits, things that they do empirically. And what has made it worse is the sociology of the profession is such that anesthesiologists love to say, well, you know, we really don't know how anesthesia works. Okay. Okay, so actually, I have to enlist your services on this, right? So the next time you hear an anesthesiologist say this, you can just say, look, let me tell you how they work. The drugs create oscillations. See, it's a perfect MIT thing, right? You know, I know how it works, right? But that's what they would say, because it makes it seem like magical or mystical or what have you. But you can't improve it if you don't understand how it works. So there's a huge sociological barrier or activation energy that has to be gotten over for this to be adopted. And we're up to doing that. It's just part of the process.
I also wonder, you know, you talked about the kind of your goal of thinking, do we need so many drugs? Like, do we need to pump as much, you know, whatever into this person? Maybe we don't. Maybe we could achieve really good results without that. How hard is that also as a general approach? Like, maybe we don't need these things.
Well, again, there's a sociological barrier. So the reason sevoflurane, the ether, is still used because it's a gas. All I have to do is just turn the dial like this, and it's all set up for you. So to do what I was doing with the various infusions, I have to set up, you know, 3 or 4 infusion pumps. It's more setup time, and people don't want to do that. This is done widely in Europe. It's done widely in South America, right? So there's a sociological phenomenon to it. And so I think that's one of the humps which we just really have to, get over. We can have much better, more precise control of the drug, of the brain states, if we do it this way. Not only that, it opens up the ideas of new approaches to how we actually do this to begin with. Like we have targeted therapies, targeted chemotherapies. We should have targeted anesthesia the same way. It's totally feasible. But I think if we lay the scientific background, the engineering background to make this happen, I think we'll get the world to adopt it.
And then, Li-Huei, the part of the incentive question for you, I guess there's sort of 2 pieces of it, but one is tied into that first slide you had about the aging population. And I think I've heard people express concerns that the kinds of medicines that are developed are often for very specific, clear things, whereas big things like Alzheimer's and depression, and, you know, there just hasn't been the advances that we've hoped for. So I guess I wonder if you feel like the incentive system is set up right for those kinds of advances. And then I guess part 2 is like, if you're talking about something that's maybe less expensive, or a less expensive intervention, do we also have an incentive system that would reward that?
Well, that's a very, very good question, Kara. So indeed, right now, you know, the incentive system is set up such a way that there seems to be a lot more incentive to develop treatment for extremely, you know, specific diseases with very, very rare specific diseases, very small population. And you come up with, some very sort of, like genetic therapy, gene therapy type of approach, very expensive. But since, we are only treating a very, very rare population of people, maybe hundreds or thousands in the entire country, there seems to be a lot more incentive to approve those approaches rather than, a very common disease like Alzheimer's. I just think that, I think because the large population, I think it put a very high premium on the safety measure. And I think that's gonna be a very high bar to cross, especially when you think about treating age-related diseases, which is unlike, most common drugs like treating an infection or treating cancer. You only need to receive the treatment for a very finite period of time. For infection, once the infection is gone, you recover, you don't need to be on the medication anymore. But for treating like Alzheimer's disease, you probably have to be on the medication for the rest of your life. So that's why, it's very, very difficult to come up with that treatment that's safe enough and effective enough.
Question from the audience. Dr. Tsai, how many sessions and over what period of time is the light gamma treatment required to show results versus no treatment? And how long does it create irreversible change, or do the cells revert back to the way they were after some period of time?
Yeah, very good question. So we have worked extensively in mouse models, and in mice, we actually can start to see beneficial effects with just 1 hour per day of exposure over, say, a week. We can already see reduction of pathology and some beneficial effects. And the longer we wait, say for months, we can clearly see profound improvement of cognitive function. And
Somebody's trying your light therapy now.
I thought it was
it's a little low frequency.
I thought it was the more romantic portion of the question.
Exactly.
But in humans, so far the results I show you is after 3 months of 1 hour per day exposure. We can start to see, separation between the control group versus the active group.
Why was I think, Li-Huei, you mentioned that Emery's suggestion to you was to try doing something non-invasive. Why was that your suggestion, like coming from what you know?
Well, so as a clinician, right, I'm always trying to think about, I've learned this cool thing in the laboratory, but how do I get it out to patients? And, I had the good fortune of working with Li-Huei, after they had done their basic experiments. There must be some way to do this. And I had worked on circadian rhythms before. And, one of the things which came out in the late 90s was you could use light to sort of shift the clock, and people would sit in front of these light boxes. And so I just suggested, maybe something like this might be feasible. Just thought I'd throw it out there,
It was really a fun time. When we first saw some, results, we were like, just increase boost gamma. But at the time, we used a very invasive method known as optogenetics. You have to implant some sort of fiber optics into part of the brain, and then you inject some virus to introduce some sort of opsin into the brain cells, and then you use light to drive these cells. And then Emery said, this is way too invasive. This is, not gonna be used in human, not for a long time. You gotta think of something more non-invasive. And I remember, my graduate student and I went to Emery's office, and we were all sitting in front of a laptop, searching the literature, trying to find whether has anybody done anything to change their brain waves, to change their oscillations, just using light or other sensory stimulation. It was really fun.
Another question from the audience. Dr. Tsai, you shared a potential non-invasive treatment and potential pharmacokinetic treatment. How do you see them working together? Will we need both? Could early and regular use of the non-invasive method reduce the need for a pharmaceutical solution?
Yeah, The answer is I don't know yet. But what I can tell you is, I really like what Emery said. We have to understand how anything works. And once you know how it works, you gain the kind of insight also that what other things you can apply this approach to. So, so my personal speculation about a disease like Alzheimer's disease is like, we use one word to describe this disease, but I think that there are actually many different types of Alzheimer's disease. I think based on your genetic background and based on other things, people can get Alzheimer's disease from different etiology. And so then what it directly means is that you may need different kinds of, medication depending on what kind of Alzheimer's disease you have, right? But then, learning how the light and sound stimulation works, we get to learn the fundamental mechanism, how this treatment can revert, the abnormal behavior and function of the cells back to more normal state. So how fundamental it is, how many different types of Alzheimer's disease this can apply to. So I think that once we know more of this, we will know better whether light and sound can take care of many of the different types of diseases, or we still need to develop specific medication approach to treat some of the different types of Alzheimer's disease, or even I'm thinking perhaps combining the light and sound with some sort of pharmacological method will be even more effective. And in fact, that's one thing that Emery and I are currently collaborating. So.
See, you obviously heard it here first. Well, we could easily go an hour, but thank you so much. Thank you so much for your questions. We'll see you back here in 15 minutes.
Great,
Thank you.
Thanks. That's great. Yeah. Thank you. That's so interesting.
Thanks for joining us. And for more information on how to connect with the MIT Alumni Association, please visit our website.